Gordon Parks said that and after 85 years of hard work on this planet to show the desolation and the poverty that was facing his community, that he had earned the right to show some of the beauty as well. And when you're looking at your life, when you're reflecting, you'll find that when you look back at things, you're going to have a different perspective. And that self reflection leads to a happier, more successful life because it allows you to make changes of what matters most to you. Gordon Parks was most well known for his writing, his photography for Life magazine, and he also was the film director of the movie Shaft in 1971. When he was doing film, it was in the 1940s when segregation and racism and Jim Crow was still a very prevalent thing. So he took pictures of what he saw going on in his community. He was a socially conscious person. It was very important for him to capture life as it was for a black in America. So, and what Gordon Parks realized is that after 85 years that he had this collection of a lot of poverty and desolation, and he just wasn't able to capture a lot of the beauty that he was able to recognize over time that there was a struggle, but there was also the beauty of overcoming that struggle, where there was lots of success stories as well. And he did not have the same ability and the freedom when he was working for Life magazine, and because of two things. One is people just are naturally gravitating towards the negative stories. It's why our news programs start off with 10, 15 negative stories in a row before they give you any positive story. That's just part of our survival instincts as human beings, where when something bad is going on, we sort of want to know to make sure that we're going to be okay as well. As we're dealing with like the coronavirus, there are lots of people all over different programmings that are talking a lot about it. And it's not that they have a lot of new or additional information. They just know that you're very concerned about how am I going to make sure that I'm protecting me and my family. And so Gordon Parks and his work with Life, it was the same understanding that people understood that there was beauty in the world, but they're more gravitated towards the negative, towards the poverty. And it's important to understand the impact that that has on you, which is why self-reflection is so positive and leads to a happier life and creates more success. Because when you're in the moment, you have a very emotional view of things, a very strong emotional view. But as you get past it, you may be able to recognize some good things that came from that. You may be more grateful for even the negative experiences because they helped to create a greater opportunity or a strength within you because you had to get stronger to overcome that obstacle. So Gordon also wanted to capture that. He wanted to capture the strength and the beauty of overcoming the Jim Crow era and the racism and just of the struggle, but also the perseverance and also the triumph. Next, Gordon says, I suffered evils, but I did not allow that to rob me of my freedom to expand. And when you talk about expansion, we're really talking about your freedom to grow, your freedom to overcome. There is this understanding that things are not always going to be the way that they should be, that things are going to be very difficult, and a lot of the time things are just going to be downright unfair. But does that mean that you cannot overcome? Should that rob you of your willingness to compete? And Gordon Parks said, look, I understand that my work requires a higher level, a higher quality of me than maybe some of my counterparts, and that is just fine with me because I'm going to excel in what I do. As you know, I'm focusing on black millionaires and billionaires, and Gordon Parks is no exception. Even though his photography and his work coming up in the 1940s, he was still able to generate close to $5 million over his lifetime. And so he said, even though I suffered great evils, that there was lots of difficulties that I faced, and there was even things that I witnessed and that I captured in the film, and the way people treated me or people in my community, as difficult as all that was, I did not allow it to take away my creativity, my imagination, my drive to do something with my life. And you have to have that as well. And that's often why self-reflection is so powerful, because you may find yourself looking back at certain decisions and you may be like, well, I probably could have made a slightly better choice on how I reacted to that, where I allowed someone to get under my skin, where it caused a more negative result in my personal life because of something that someone else was doing, instead of me just kind of sidestepping it, allowing myself to kind of keep going. And I talk to my kids all the time about that when someone like cuts me off, my kid's like, well, why don't you blow up the horn? And I'm like, because I don't know what's going on in that person's life. Best case scenario, there's something going on where they really have to get to another place because they're very excited to celebrate. The worst case, there could be someone's health is in danger, and then obviously there's just the most likely that they didn't see me, and it's not as common that they're actually just a jerk and they're trying to be mean and vindictive towards me. But if they were and I blow my horn, well, what if they get road rage and then I allow something that would have been a second and it would have not changed my life if I let it go to be something that could put my family and my kids in danger because I allowed my emotions in one moment to drive my decision making. And they look at me and they're like, I don't think it's that big of a deal, Dad. But and I tell them I don't know if it's that big of a deal either, but that's the point I'm making, that right now I know it's not a big deal at all. Someone cut me off, that's fine. I had to touch my brakes. I had to slow down. They kept going. I'm fine. My kids are fine. My life is great. You have to be able to look at certain situations that way, even though they may be much grander. And I do mean much grander. I actually was just reading an article where they were talking about the Sandy Hook tragedy and how some Rwandans had called one of the kids and was just talking about how you don't have to allow the circumstance to steal your joy. And what they were saying is look, we dealt with where this one person in particular, she said that she had witnessed the death and the by a machete of her family where they burned her village, all of her friends and family, and they had cut her and buried her alive, but she had to claw her way out of the ground, and then she had to wait for the bleeding to stop, and she hid up in the hills and survived off of grass. And she said, look, I got past that because no one has the ability to steal my happiness, my joy, and my ability to keep going unless I give it to them. No matter how awful it is that someone treats you, you don't have to let that steal your humanity, your drive, your willingness to make the world that better place that you're driving towards. Next, Gordon Parks talks about his traveling to Chicago. He said he got there around like the 1940, 1941, and he said he took lots of pictures that had to do with fashion, but he also wanted to make sure that he captured what he considered socially conscious images, where he wanted people to understand not that everything was rainbows and skittles, but that there was a real fight that was going on, that people were fighting for equality, that they were dealing with oppression, but they were still finding ways to overcome. And as I often mention, the Choja lifestyle is the lifestyle of rising to the challenge. And that's very important for you to understand that you can succeed. And I think that that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about providing these videos and sharing these stories is the fact that a lot of us have no idea about these different people. How many variety of occupations and success stories that we can find within photography and business and science and math, engineering, that you literally can find black success, black excellence across a spectrum of industries, but we just don't hear those stories as much. And there are studies that talk about how difficult it can be for someone. And I believe that the most interesting one that I had read, it was basically a study that had to do with some women, and they were getting ready to take certain tests, and they said if they added a question in the test that had you list your gender, that the women had a much lower score after they wrote their gender down versus the women that did not have to do that. And the reason is because we are socially being programmed in a way by the images and the ways that we're being raised, where subconsciously it triggers certain reactions where women in engineering, it is frowned upon. And a lot of women that are in engineering, they probably have had someone along their life tell them, well, that's not really an industry for women. It's very difficult, different things like that. So when they're doing these tests, if they ask them their gender, it had a negative impact. And that's true across a spectrum of communities and races, religions, and genders, where there's a certain perception that society has of you. And even though you fight those stereotypes, it doesn't change the fact that they still have a subconscious trigger. And so I'm trying to share these images, these videos where we're sharing success, and it's allowing us to reprogram some of the misconceptions that you see within the black community, where you're only seeing what the most negative and the poverty and the issues that are going on, but there's tons of success, tons of greatness, and tons of excellence that we want to be able to focus on. And so there is The fact that on one end you do need to know, and Gordon talks about, well, it's important that I want to do things from a socially conscious perspective, which at that point in time was a little bit different, where we needed the people that were painting rose colored glasses on everything to understand that these people are suffering, that they're going through struggle. But I also think that there, and Gordon talks about that when he's self reflecting, that it's also important to be able to talk about the triumph over those struggles. It is the triumph that allows other people to say, you know what, if they can do it, I can do it. And then someone else will say, well, if you can do it, then I can do it. And then it catches on like wildfire, which is often why you don't see those stories being presented as much. That there are way more movies where they talk about slavery than there are where they talk about successful black business owners. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And the answer is because it is going to change the way that you perceive your ability to interact with the world, the success that you can create for yourself. And you have to be able to allow yourself to absorb some of this information so that you're able to make steps that someone would take if they believe they can overcome the issues that are created within the constructs of their life, whether that has to do with poverty, whether it has to do with education and the system and the neighborhood or crime or any variety of its situations and reasons. It's important to understand that I can find someone, if you gave me a particular situation, that I can find someone who succeeded in that situation, and you can too. And then you want to allow your mind to absorb that information and say, you know what? If they can do it, I can do it. And then you just keep doing that every single day. Watch the same video. If they can do it, I can do it. And then before you know it, it becomes a part of your subconscious, where now when people are asking you different questions, it triggers that confidence that you have from the fact that you have a success story in the back of your mind. And that leads very well into number 4, where Gordon talks about just the impact of being able to capture history. That when you understand history, that when people look back in hundreds or thousands or decades and tens of thousands, whenever people look back and they can see this information, they will know what was happening at this particular time. And because of that, he knows that the information that he is putting together, the images that he's capturing, the movies and the films that he's writing and creating, that he knows that it's very important for history, that people are going to know what happened. There's an African proverb that says the lion will always be the villain until the lion learns how to write. And what that basically means is because the lion is shot and the hunter writes the history of what happened, it changes the way that the story may have been told if you heard it from the lion's perspective. And so it's very important that you capture history and understanding of it, because you do not want to be misinformed and miseducated. I mean, there's tons of information, and I could talk about it for 4 hours and days, where I'm not going to go into it, but just that the history that we have that's being presented to us on a daily basis, that history is from the perspective of the hunter. And so you want to make sure that you are also gathering some information from the perspective of the lion. And the more lions that have the ability to write and capture history, the more history and the more accurate it is going to be. I remember reading, I think it was in the 1912 encyclopedia, just the way that people believed in the perception that there was of black people then, and that people thought of it as science. Like, this is science, that they are an inferior people, blah, blah, blah. You know, I always focus on the solutions. Well, the solution, very simply, is diversity. And the only way you're going to get more opportunities is by creating them within the community, where then we're able to share the history and the facts and the information, where now we're educating each other from the perspective of the lion and not of the hunter. And it's very important that we take that mantle. And Gordon understood that. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't just taking pictures to get a buck, but that he was capturing the heart and soul of the country during the time. And number 5 is to understand that there is one more horizon. This horizon is further out than the goals that you set for yourself at a younger age or your middle age, and you probably achieved many of them, but then you have to set another one. And this one you may not get to. Gordon wants you to understand that some of these horizons and some of these goals that you're setting for yourself, they're going to be achieved by the next generation. But it's important to make sure that you plant the flag as far up as you can, so that when the next person comes up, it's that much further. Which is why you always hear me talking about the goal should be to focus on winning. That when we focus on the fighting, that we're not actually moving anywhere. Instead, if you focus on winning, then now you're moving towards the finish line. If you focus on fighting, then you may be stuck right exactly where you're at. you're engaging, you're talking, you're trying to convert people over. But as you probably understand, that it's a very difficult thing. I don't provide this information to convert people. I provide this information to people who are looking for this information. People who are not trying to be converted. They just know that there's something slightly off, but they don't know exactly where to look. They're not sure exactly how to change anything. And that's who my information is for. So for you, you want to make sure that you are also focused on winning. And you're going to strive as far as you can, but don't set a goal that you can accomplish within your entire life. You want to be able to get it as far as you can towards the finish line. And if for some reason you accomplish your goal, right, like you already know, my goal is to make sure black wealth does not hit zero as it's projected to do in the year 2053. Now, when we get to the year 2053, does that mean that the issue is completely resolved? I don't know. Does it mean that we maybe bought another 5 years or another 10 years or another 50 years? I don't know. But wherever it's at, if for some reason the goal is accomplished, then we're going to create another goal. And if for some reason the goal is not accomplished, I want to have advanced the cause far enough that when the next person comes in to take the mantle, that we don't have as much to do, that there is an infrastructure, there's a framework, and there's a path to success. They're simply going to pick it up and continue the march. And so you want to make sure that you have this in mind when you are reflecting. The reason that self-reflection is so powerful, that it leads to happier and more successful people, is because it allows you to be able to take the experiences that you've had so far and to make very intelligent decisions of what you're going to do next. It allows you to be able to recognize things that you thought were important, but you realize that that was society's teaching, and that's actually not very important for you at all. So you're able to update some of your goals. Self-reflection, the key reason self-reflection is so powerful is the fact that you're always constantly growing and changing. That the goals that you had when you were a teenager and the perception that you had then is different than the one that you had if you either went to college or you got your first job, which is different than the one you have if you ended up starting a family, which is different than the one you have when all your kids are grown and you're dealing with your grandkids. Your perception is going to change, and if you are never having that self-reflection, then you're not allowing yourself to update your drive. If you think of it like a computer where you're running on the same old program, but those things don't move you anymore. They don't drive you anymore. When you self-reflect, it gives you a chance to update to the most recent version. And so it becomes very important for you to be able to understand what you're driving for. Is this still important to me? Why was it important then? And is there a better way for me to move forward to accomplish this goal? As always, I do have a free resource available to you guys at forecasthope.com/opportunity. There you can download my Lifetime Millionaire Success Blueprint. In it, you'll be able to discover how to create $1 million in your life or capitalize on your next $1 million opportunity. I'm Dre, always thankful for your time together. If you've enjoyed this video or listening to this audio, I just simply ask for you to subscribe. Until next time, continue blessings on your journey to become the champion of your dream life. And as always, better self, better wealth.